Hello, dear chess friends. My name is Guðmundur Kjartansson and I'm a Grandmaster from Iceland. Today we have the National Day of Chess in Iceland, so I thought it would be appropriate and a good idea to make my first YouTube video. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, we have this special National Day of Chess on the birthday of our first Grandmaster, Friðrik Olafsson. I don't think he needs much introduction. I mean, maybe for the younger generations, but he was, of course, one of the best players in the world. He was president of FIDE and so on. So I definitely recommend looking into his career. He beat Fischer, Tal, and many other of the best players in the world. So here he's black against Petrosian. He was more known as an attacking player, of course, when he was at his best. But yeah, he has some interesting endgames as well, of course, and I think he played them quite well from what I've seen. And yeah, so I thought we could cover this one, about this game, and then in general this kind of rook endgame, the rook and two pawns against one pawn, um, where white has an ace pawn against G and F. And yeah, this looks kind of a simple, maybe even boring to some, a simple endgame, but it's definitely worth studying. It's maybe not that common, but I think still any such work that you put into the endgame, I think definitely um, is very valuable because you develop like a deeper feel for the endgame. And this is, I mean, yeah, I have never, yeah, I looked through my games and I don't think I've ever had this game occur in a classical game, but I think most of us have had this kind of position at least in a blitz game. Yeah, so this is something that can definitely arise. So let's just get to work and look through this game. Yeah, so Friedrich, who was black, just captured a pawn on a4. He's taking the fourth rank, and the rook, I think, stands quite well there. But still, yeah, maybe before we continue, we should just mention that, yeah, if you don't know, you should maybe think about how is the evaluation of this kind of an endgame, and also with pawn on h2, h3, h4, h5, like all these different kind of endgames. I mean, as long as you don't lose the pawn right away. How is the evaluation? And I mean, I'm sure too many maybe strong players, it's not obvious. And in practical play, yeah, I was surprised that the side with a pawn up actually wins quite a lot of games. So it's actually in practical play, it's more common to see wins than draws, even though objectively it is a draw. And I think um, that it should not be that complicated. I mean, it's a little bit tricky for sure, but I think after this video, after we've just learned the basic ideas and so on, I think we should be able to hold this one quite comfortably. So we'll look through these different scenarios and try to understand the main ideas. Yeah, so what surprised me when I looked through this game is that Petrosian kind of just waited passively, which is, we can't say it's wrong. I mean, it's still quite fine, but as white, I think it's more natural to play something like rook c5 first and make black, force black to make kind of some kind of concession if he wants to enter with the king. So he will have to play either g5 or king g6 followed by f5 and try to enter with the king that way. Um, Yeah, but it kind of gives black free play. It's still, of course, very fine. Rook c8 happened, which is a fine move. It's a good move, actually. But in these old annotations in the megabase, this is actually given a double question mark. And it said that rook b3 is better, but actually rook b3 is actually lost after f4 because the king will enter to h4. So that's something to be avoided, but rook c8, check. And yeah, so this is basically goes with the king to e3. So if we go back here, I mean the main idea is for to try something for black. It's either to try to enter somehow with a king to h4, and that's one of the reasons why the rook stands quite well on c8. You can always, in most cases, we can stop such ideas quite simply with rook h8 check, or defend the pawn if we need to. And the other way is to enter with a king um, to f4 and e3. So yeah, here white played king g3. Another move was, yeah, king g3 is all right. It's still okay. h4 would also have been sensible. To f4, rook c7. It looks quite scary, of course. But with h4, we made space for the king. So after check, we can go to h3. And after f3, we go to g3. And yeah, it looks quite scary to allow this, but this actually doesn't lead to anything special for black. And often, if we get the g7 pawn, we can often sacrifice the rook for the f pawn and promote the queen in time, and yeah, and the game ending in a draw. So king g3 he played, allowing g5. Yeah, now it definitely looks scary, but it is still a draw, in fact. And yeah, there are even 4 different moves that make a draw here. So I think rook c8 is a good move. What else? Even waiting with rook b4 can also be sensible. f4 check, f3, and f2. And yeah, this is an interesting position. If we take on g5, there follows rook a8, and the rook is coming to g8 and g1 that loses. But often in these cases, there are many such cases where white goes king g3 in this kind of position. So that's definitely good, something that's good to remember, this theme. So let's go back. Petrosian played here h4. And now, if you want to try to guess what Friedrich played next, or how he followed up, how he continued, you can pause the video and look for it yourself. So let's continue. So the move that Friedrich played was simply king d3. Rook b4. And now I hope you found the next move as well. Simply continue to chase the rook. And yeah, I would say it's a quite nice idea. Rook b8 and now check. king has to go up, and now we have these two passed pawns. And yeah, so this is basically lost. Um, yeah, there are some rare cases where we see h4 and g4, um, where still white manages to hold somehow, but yeah, this is not one of those cases. So h5. He can also play king f4. He can do many different things, but just decides to be sensible and go for the pawn. And this is easily winning. Of course, if white goes for the pawn in game, then it's an easy win. All right. So then if we go into the next endgame, moment. So now I thought it would be a good idea to go through each of these cases. First with the pawn h5, then h4, then h3, and then h2. So the game we looked at had the pawn on h3, of course, and that is definitely the most common um, way to handle the position. I mean, usually, very often the pawn is already there, or white, or the side defending decides to keep the pawn on h3. But I mean, it's definitely worth looking at all the other options. And I still haven't decided 100% on my preference. I think each of these endgames can definitely be a little bit tricky. But yeah, let's just go through each one of them and then we can compare. And yeah, of course, in these endgames, we generally want to have the king as active as possible when defending. And in some cases, we have to go passive or decide between the two. But if possible, we want to keep the king active. Same goes with the rook. We want to keep the rook active and try to bother and stall the black king and the pawns. And but yeah, there are also cases where the like when the pawn is on h3 or h2. Often cases where the rook is actually stands quite well passively on c2, for example. So let's see this the first case with h5. So what do we need to know about this endgame? Um, First, you can think about how is this endgame? Do you think it's a draw or do you think it's winning for black? And well, the answer is it's it's yeah, it's definitely winning for black if he has the eighth ring. But in this case, it's white holds, and I think this kind of formation is it's actually not so bad if white knows what he's doing, but he has to be a little bit careful. But if like let's imagine some scenario like this, if it's a white to move in this position, he will have to play rook c8, else he's just completely lost. In this case, in this position, black can either win by king h6 or just go rook b8. We would see something like this. And yeah, this wins. So rook a4 check. And now again, this is a case where you have to decide between being active or going passive with king g3. If you go king f5, there's just rook h4 and the pawn falls. So in some other cases, when the pawn is further back, I go on h3. In similar cases, we would have to go active. In that case, play king to f3. And allow rook h2 because we would have we would be able to defend on the h file. But here there's no space, so that's something to have in mind when the pawn is on h5 or h4. We don't really have any space to make counterplay on the h file. So in those cases we have to go back. Check. No, king h6, rook h8, check. King g5. And here we attack the g7 pawn with rook h7. Yeah, if rook g8, the rook g4 check, and then take on h5. So we want to both attack the g7 pawn and uh, protect the h5 pawn as well at the same time. Rook a7 happens. Well, he can check first on a3, but we just move the king back, and eventually black has to go to a7 again, and then we move the king forward. So yeah, white is just waiting with his king because the rook and pawn are not moving at the moment. Yeah, if a move like h6 comes now, then black can simply take on check on a3, and let's say move like h6, check, go back with the king, and now instead of g takes h6, this is a theoretical draw that I hope some of you know. Probably most of you know that it's a theoretical draw, but it's quite complicated, of course, to play it in practice. But g6 here simply should win the game, and the h6 pawn will fall sooner or later. So we cannot play h6, not yet at least, so we have to wait with the king. Can go to a3 or f3. And we generally don't want to go back with the king. We don't want to play king g2, for example. Yeah, I wonder if we can play. I'm going to check with the engine just quickly. If we can play king g2 here. Okay, it is still all right to play that, but it's not maybe optimal, let's say. It's better to keep the king on a3 and f3. Here f4, king f3 or h3, at least the same thing. Yeah, in these positions we should definitely not be bringing the king um, back to g2 because of king g4. So king f3. So in this position, um, yeah, check. It goes back. Yeah, so basically, if it's black to move, then we just black has to find a move. He can play a move like rook b7, wait somehow, or do as he did, just give us checks and go back. And if it's white to move, like now, we have to play h6. The same goes for if the king is on h3. h6, rook a3, king g2, and takes the pawn on h6. So this is a theoretical draw. Of course, it's always a little bit tricky with this f and h pawn. It's not that simple, but I would say this is a fairly good version for white because normally black doesn't, or the side with the two pawns doesn't push the f pawn so far early on. He'd probably rather have his pawn f5 and start pushing the h pawn first. But I mean, it is possible, and yeah, but it's the correct play. This is a draw, and yeah, I think it's kind of okay to go for this, but maybe not so clean, but it's an option. Yeah, so from this whole endgame, this is basically the best that white will get. So we can look at the next endgame. The pawn is on h4. Yeah, this one is really interesting. Yeah, this position right here. So this is another case where you can, if you want, you can pause the video and look for white's best move. And yeah, you can try to even think like a bit further if you want to. Um, yeah, if you can, yeah, see the next few moves even, it's even better. All right, so I hope some of you have solved it. Uh, so this is the move. There's only one move that draws for white. Yeah, so generally, like I think normally white kind of refrains from playing h4. He prefers to keep his pawn on h3 normally. But it's if white knows this plan, this correct plan, then it's yes, not such a big deal. But yeah, it's a little bit risky. But it can happen that we find ourselves in this kind of situation. Maybe we already had the pawn on h4, let's say. So it's definitely useful to know. So the move that white played is king h3. So let's first see what happens if we play a move like rook a8. f5 check, king f4, check. Yeah, and here we see another case where the h file is simply too short. If we would move all the pieces one rank down, then we would be able to, we would have a counterattack on the h file or be able to defend the pawn at least. So, so this is, yeah, so in this position, amazingly, king h3 is the only move that draws. And here, black has two tries. So king h5 or f5. Let's start with f5. So if a move like, um, if we play a move like rook c3 or rook f3, other way, then black plays rook b1. That's something we don't want to allow. So here, the only move for white is rook g3. This is a good move. And the reason why we played king h3, we want to keep the g file open. Rook b1, and now we play this nice move, king h2. Just defending against rook h1 check. King g2, so of course also good. Just defending, and then rook b2 check, go back, let's say rook e2. And now, I mean, it's still not that simple. We have to, the only way is to move the rook to g1 here. And yeah, I wonder about rook g5. Can quickly check with the engine if that's possible. Okay, rook g5. Okay, actually, yeah, rook g5, that's even, yeah, basically in this position, kind of everything wins. But I think it's a good rule to have. Simply keep the rook on the g file. It holds the draw quite easily. Rook e3 and king h2. And king h5, then you just check and take the g6 pawn. So king h5. Yeah, this is another. Here you have to find another accurate move. And yeah, you can pause the video if you want. So the move is rook f3. And after f5, we just go rook g3. And we got what we wanted. If black can play, I guess it's better to try to play rook a6, just a waiting move. We have to keep an eye on this f pawn. Yeah, this is another example where the the white rook is kind of eyeing one of the pawns and making trying to make black's coordination awkward. But here we don't need to worry about the check on a3. We just play the rook back to f1, f5, g1, and just go back. And when we get up on g6, then it's just a simple draw. All right. Then we can look at the next game, which is yeah, another high-profile game. I mean, yeah, the most high-profile games I found in this kind of endgame is, well, it was because in '49 there was a game between Smyslov and Keres in the Soviet championship. But that one, yeah, well, Keres had a pawn up, but he didn't try too much, so it ended peacefully quite soon. And yeah, then there's the game between Petrosian and Friedrich, and this one is played in 62. So Gligorits is white and Bobby Fischer is black. And yeah, we'll just go quickly through this game. Fischer defended quite confidently, so he didn't get like too many critical positions in this game, but it's worth seeing how he defends. And he already has his pawn on h6, so there's no choice. Else, it would, if the pawn would be on a7, for example, it would be interesting to see what his choice would be if he would play h6 or keep the pawn on h7. Yeah, I think most prefer to have the pawn on the third rank, but it doesn't mean that it's the easiest. But I don't know. Yeah, it looks the most logical, I guess. Um, yeah. So in this case, for example, well, in the game against Friedrich Petrosian, then Friedrich was already controlling the fourth rank. Oh, now it's reversed colors, but it's basically the same thing. Um, no, no, I mean now the side that has the pawn is defending the fourth rank, we could say. So yeah, so I mean that's I guess that's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, so here he checks and yeah tries to make he wants white to make some kind of concession, to move the pawns. And yeah, keeping the rook on the rank. And he goes up. Yeah, here we see another case. He's just attacking the pawn on g4, making yeah. Then white has to, if he wants to advance, he has to at some point play f5, make another concession. F5 check, king f4. Hmm. Yeah, and in this kind of endgame, what I noticed also is, yeah, I think this is shouldn't be that difficult to defend. But there were some cases like, yeah, if the pawn is not yet on f5, if the king has access to the f5 square, for example, that I think can be more tricky. Um, yeah, so I think if we force the opponent to push the pawns all the way, then it's definitely uh, good for us. Yeah, and okay, this is just a rook endgame with a pawn up with an f pawn. Those endgames can be a bit tricky. You even see strong players lose those kind of endgames. But yeah, I think yeah, you definitely have to. That's an endgame that you should know. That's like a basis for knowing these endgames with one pawn. That's definitely a good basis for this kind of endgames that we're looking into with more pawns. But Fischer has no trouble. I mean, of course, he goes to the short side with his king, the king side. He wants to have the rook on the queen side. on the long side to make checks from the side. Yeah, and after rook f8, he's black. White is simply preparing to play king e7 and then push f6 and so on. So here, yeah, we could see like if black's king would be on d7, this position would be lost. But he has to stay on h7 and rook a1. Yeah, he goes back. Yeah. So he holds the endgame. This is something you could. I mean, if you're not sure about this endgame, if you're not completely confident, then I definitely recommend looking into them. Yeah, it's more important than the endgame we're looking into. I mean, it's definitely just something we should know, or at least have a look at every now and then if you haven't for a while. So, okay, let's check out the next game. This is the game. Aniskiri has white and Nepomniachtchi is black. It's just a rapid tournament online, 2020 during COVID. So Giri takes the pawn. Yeah, this is quite similar to the Fischer game. So we'll just go quickly through. But you could see that the pawn was on h7 in the beginning, so Nepomniachtchi he preferred to have the pawn on h6. So that's something to be aware of. Yeah, like here we see again, he kind of starts bothering white by attacking his pawns. So they take their time and slowly, I mean, eventually, white has to advance his pawns. Yeah, this is, I think, just almost the same position as in the game of Fischer. Just kind of playing back and forth. Yeah, and yeah, rook e1. This is another. Yeah, this is a nice illustration. He's just cutting the e file, not allowing the king to enter right away. Also, when the king is here, also we could have black could have played rook f1, for example. That's also a good idea. And then, um, if white wants to proceed, he has to play f5. So you see that he doesn't allow him to play, like if you go rook b1, for example, um, let's say rook d6, rook a1, something like this. And then all of a sudden, white can enter and he has access to the f5 square. And those cases can be extremely dangerous. So I would always try to force white to play f5. So check. Yeah, so this is it's quite funny. He allows him to take on g4, but I guess it looks a bit scary after something like king e7, pushing the f pawn. But this is actually a draw. But there's no need to take it. He just plays rook a4. Yeah, now h5. This just secures the draw. This is elementary, of course. Yeah. So this was a nice simple defense. So yeah, these two examples, Fischer and Nepo, I would say, um, yeah, that's kind of the way you should defend. So let's see next game.